Okay, guys, it's time for an update video for the Chicago BBR tournament. And I just want to make this video, this particular video is just for all of the rule changes that are going to be in play, that are officially released by Sireblood as BBR6, that are going to be in play at the BBR Chicago tournament. So these are changes upon the most recent version of BBR. So BBR 5.2, I think it was, which was played in St. Louis and Atlanta. So for BBR6, I'm just going to rattle through them. I'm going to include a typed up version summary of these changes in the description. And yeah, let's just get into it. So the first thing to keep in mind for the new BBR6 rules in play in Chicago will be the new turn order. So the new turn order is Germany, Japan, US, UK, China, Italy, Commonwealth and France, and then Russia at the end. So with this new turn order, Germany and Japan going first, it's really going to speed things up, at least for the Axis, because no longer does Japan have to wait and see, okay, what is Russia going to do with its Far East units? It can just start moving right away. So long as the Germany and Japan moves do not overlap each other in any way, which on turn one, it's pretty much impossible for that to happen. So keep that in mind. And then Russia going at the end, which is Russia gets the last laugh. Okay, so in terms of national objective changes, overall, they're pretty small, except for the United States. The United States has a complete rework of its national objectives. But let's start with Japan. Japan no longer has its Burma NO. So if it controls Burma, it would have +3 IPCs per turn. It no longer has that NO. That NO is null and void. So we will not be using that. For the United Kingdom, they get a one-time NO of 8 IPCs if Portugal becomes allied, even if the Axis capture Portugal. So the United Kingdom has that additional national objective in play now for BBR6. For the U.S., so throw out all the old U.S. national objectives. They are not in play, except for the one card where as long as you have a ground unit present in Normandy Bordeaux or Paris, which was 5 IPCs. That national objective, I believe it's card number 69. That one is still in play. The rest of them are not. So here are the new national objectives. They get +3 per territory when at war for the following: Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Palau, Marshall Islands, Caroline Islands, Taiwan, Marianas, Hainan, and Taiwan. So all of those, basically all the Japanese islands, the United States gets an island NO, much like Japan does. So it sort of encourages the island hopping strategy that was actually employed during the war. I think it's a great NO, and it makes a lot of sense. The other NO is +5 IPCs if they have at least 2 ground units in Casablanca. That's for Europe, and that's if they're at war, of course. The next one, at war, +10 IPCs if no longer neutral. So once the U.S. is in the war, they get 10 IPCs per turn. Then they have +1. This is another national objective, +1 per originally controlled U.S. territory. U.S. starts with 17. It says that on the card as well. So if the USA loses the Philippines and Japan goes J2 on the U.S., well, then U.S. would only collect 16 IPCs for that national objective. So they start with 17. For each territory they lose, they go down in that national objective. And now finally, one of the more unique national objectives here is based on what turn the United States is brought into the war. So once this card reads, once the United States enters the war, sorry, I can't speak. Once the United States enters the war, a one-time payment is issued on their collect income phase, which varies by turn. So if Japan or the European Axis declare war on the United States on turn 1, the U.S. does not receive anything for this national objective. If turn 2, they are brought into the war, they will collect 10 IPCs one time on their collect income phase. Now, if it's turn 3 or later, it's 30 IPCs one time on their collect income phase. So there's a little bit of a penalty built in for Japan and Germany trying to hold the U.S. out till the middle of the game. So that concludes the U.S. national objective changes. Now, there are some victory point adjustments, 3 of them. So the Pacific Islands point, which was normally if the Axis controlled four Commonwealth, British, or sorry, UK or US islands, they would get that victory point. So now it's 5 instead of 4. So they need to control 5 of those islands to get the victory point. Similarly, I can't say that word. That's a hard word for me to say for some reason. Similarly, can't say it. Atlantic Wall is up to 5 ground units instead of 4. So usually the European Axis would get the Atlantic Wall point if they had 4 ground units in each of the Atlantic Wall territories. It's now 5 units. So those Atlantic Wall territories are Norway, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, and Normandy Bordeaux. And then lastly, we have the imperial point, which is usually when Japan is at 52 or higher on the income tracker. Well, now it's 55. So 3 more IPCs added to that in order to get that imperial point. Okay. That concludes victory point changes. Now there's a very small setup change just to Russia. Russia gets 4 additional starting infantry. They get 2 additional infantry in Moscow and 2 additional in Belarus. That is the only setup change for BBR6. And then there are 2 small rule adjustments. So for the UK, if the UK declares war on Japan, instead of Japan declaring war on it, UK will no longer receive its free infantry in India each round like it normally would when at war. So there's a little bit of a penalty for the UK declaring war on Japan. They just would not receive that 1 infantry per turn out of India. And then for the US, in the previous version, the U.S. naval restrictions on the European side of the board were lifted on round 3, even if they were not at war. So they can move into any sea zone on the European side of the board, the Atlantic side. I'll say Atlantic because it's sea zones. They can move into any Atlantic sea zone so long as there's not an Axis surface ship present while not at war. So for this BBR6 version, those naval restrictions can be lifted at any turn if the European Axis declare war on Russia. Not Japan, the European Axis. So let's say the European Axis declare war on Russia on round 2. Then the U.S. is not in the war for some reason. The U.S. naval restrictions are lifted. So they can move into any sea zone in the Atlantic so long as there are no Axis surface ships present. So yeah, those are all of the rule changes. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, email me, chat me on WhatsApp, and I'll be sure to answer them as quickly as I can. These changes will be in effect for BBR Chicago, like I mentioned. We're going to have all the cards, we're going to have all the rule books, we're going to have the setup charts. Everything is going to be reflective of these changes because they are official and they're out there in the ether now. So I will put a summary again in the description. I'll put a summary also on the WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever I have to do to make sure all of you guys have all the information you need coming into BBR Chicago. And just a reminder, we have 2 more days till registration closes. June 15th is the deadline I put in place just so that we can have an accurate figure on how many teams and people are coming so we can plan out food and prizes and all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned. I'm going to actually film another video in a little bit talking about how the day 1 and day 2 seeding is going to work. So stay tuned for that as well. So later, guys.